Harmony is a fundamental law here. There can be no confliction. I do not suggest that we are in a state of perfection. We should be an immensely higher realm. We should be in an immensely higher realm if we were. But we are in perfection insofar as this realm is concerned. If we as individuals become more perfect than the realm in which we live, we become worthy of advancing to a higher state, and we do so. But while we are where we are, in this realm or higher, we are living in a state of perfection according to the limits of that realm. I have dwelt rather at length upon our musical experiences because of the great position of music in our lives and in the realm in which we are living. The whole attitude to music held by so many people of the earth undergoes a great change when they eventually come to spirit. Music is looked upon by many on the earth plane as merely a pleasant diversion, a pleasant adjunct to the earthly life, but by no means a necessity. Here it is part of our life, not because we make it so, but because it is part of natural existence, as are flowers and trees, grass and water, and hills and dales. It is an element of spiritual nature. Without it, a vast deal of the joy would depart out of our lives. We do not need to become master musicians to appreciate the wealth of music that surrounds us in color and sound. But as in so many other features of this life, we accept and enjoy to the full, and in the enjoyment of our heritage, we can afford to smile at those who persist in believing that we live in a world of emptiness. A world of emptiness. What a shock so many people have upon their coming into the spirit world, and how immensely glad and relieved they are to find that it turns out quite pleasant after all, that it is not a terrifying place, that it is not one stupendous temple of hymn-singing religion, and that they are able to feel at home in the land of their new life. When this joyful realization has come to them, some of them are reminded that they looked upon the various descriptions of this life that have come from us from time to time as rather material, and how pleased they are to discover that it is so. What it is, if it is not real music. Wait a minute. What is it if it is not material? The magicians that we heard playing were playing upon very real, solid instruments from very real music. The conductor was a very real person, conducting his orchestra with a very material baton. But the beautiful music thought form was not so very material, as were its surroundings or the means to create it, in just the same relative way as an earthly rainbow and the sun and moisture that cause it. At the risk of making myself very tedious, I have reverted more than once to this strange fallacy that the world I am living in, here in spirit, is vague and shadowy. It is strange that some minds strive always to banish from the world of spirit every tree and flower, and the other 1,001 delights. There is something of conceit in this that makes such things exclusive to the earth world. At the same time, if any soul thinks that such things have no business to exist in the spirit world, he is at liberty to abstain from both the sight and enjoyment of them, by betaking himself to some barren spot, where his susceptibilities will not be offended by such earthly objects as trees and flowers and water and even human beings, and there he can give himself up to a state of beatific contemplation, surrounded by the heavenly nothingness that he thinks should be heaven proper. No soul is forced into an unwilling task here, or into surroundings that he considers ungenial. I venture to assert that it will not be long before such a soul emerges from his retreat and joins his fellows in the enjoyment of all the delights of God's heaven. There is just one fault among every other world. There is just one fault among one or two others that the earth world possesses. the overwhelming superiority in its own mind over every other world, but principally over the spirit world. We can afford to be amused, though our amusements turn to sadness when we see the distress of souls upon their arrival here, when they realize that they are at last faced with eternal truth beyond question or doubt. It is then that humility so often sets in, but we never reproach. The reproaching comes from within each soul itself. And what, perhaps, it will be asked, has all this to do with musical experiences? Just this, that after every new experience I have thought the same thoughts and nearly spoken the words to both Ruth and Edwin. Ruth has always echoed my words. Edwin has always been in agreement with me, though, of course, that what we were seeing was not new to him by any means, but he still marveled at these things here, as indeed we all, whether we have but just arrived or whether we have been over here many years of earth time. As we walked after the concert, Edwin pointed out to us the dwelling places of many of the teachers in the various halls of learning, who preferred to live close to the seats of their work. They were for the most part unpretentious houses, and it would have been comparatively easy to guess the occupation of the owner. So we were told, from the various evidences within of their work. Edwin said that we should always be welcome should we ever wish to call upon any of the teachers. The exclusiveness which must necessarily surround such people when they are incarnate vanishes when they come into spirit. All values become drastically altered in such matters. The teachers themselves do not cease their own studies because they are teaching. They are ever investigating and learning and passing on to their pupils what they have thus gained. Some have progressed to a higher realm, but they still retain their interest in their former sphere and continuously visit it and their many friends to pursue their teaching. But we have already spent some time on this subject, and Edwin is waiting to take us on to other places of importance in the city. You scroll on down here. Plans for future work. A short walk brought us to a large rectangular building, which our friend informed us was the Hall of Science, and my fair companion and I were at a loss to know how science, as we always understood the word on earth, could have any place in the spirit world. However, we were soon to learn many things, the chief of which was that the earth world has the spirit world to thank for all the major scientific discoveries that have been made throughout the centuries. The laboratories of the world of spirit are many decades in advance of those of the earth plane, and it will be years before many revolutionary discoveries are allowed to be sent through to the earth world, because the earth has not yet sufficiently progressed. Neither Ruth nor I had any very great leanings toward science and engineering, and Edwin, knowing our taste in that direction, proposed that we should give but a moment or two to this particular hall. In the Hall of Science, every field of scientific and engineering investigation, study, and discovery was covered, and here were to be seen many of those men whose names have become household words, and who, since passing into spirit, have continued their life's work with their fellow scientists with the full and immense resources of the spirit world at their command. Here they can solve those mysteries that baffled them when they were on earth. There is no longer any such thing as personal rivalry. Reputations have no more to be made, and the many material handicaps are abandoned forever. It follows that where such a gathering of savants can exist, together with their unlimited resources, the results must be correspondingly great. In the past ages, all the epoch-making discoveries have come from the spirit world. Of himself, incarnate man can do very little. Most people are content to consider the earth world as sufficient unto itself. Indeed, it is not. The scientist is fundamentally a man of vision. It may be limited but it is there nevertheless. And our own spirit scientists can and do impress their earthly colleagues with the fruits of their investigation. In many cases where two men are working upon the same problem, the one who is in spirit will be far ahead of his conferee who is still on earth. A hint from the former is very often enough to set the latter upon the right track, and the result is a discovery for the benefit of humanity. In so many cases, humanity has been benefited, but alas, in so many cases, humanity has suffered sorrow and tribulation through the devilish perversion of those discoveries. Every one of them that is sent from the spirit world is for the advantage and spiritual progression of man. If perverted minds use those same things for the destruction of man, then man has only himself to blame. That is why I affirm that the earth world has not spiritually progressed enough to have many more splendid inventions that have already been perfected here. They are ready and waiting, but if they were sent through to the earth plane in its present state of spiritual mind, they would be misused by unscrupulous people. The people of the earth have it in their power to see that modern inventions are employed solely for their spiritual and material good. When the time comes that real spiritual progress is made, then the earth plane can expect a flood of new inventions and discoveries to come through from the scientists and engineers of the spirit world. But the earth plane has a long and sorrowful way to go before that time comes. And in the meantime, the work of the spirit scientists continues. We in spirit do not require the many inventions of the earth plane. I think I have sufficiently indicated that our laws are totally different from those of the earth plane. We have no use for inventions that will increase our speed of travel as with you. Our own method of transit is as rapid as thought, because thought is the motive power. We have no need for methods of saving life, because we are indestructible. We have no need for the hundreds of inventions to make life easier, safer, more comfortable, and enjoyable, because our life is all that, and more than that already. But in this hall of science, many, many devoted men were working for the betterment of the earth plane through the medium of their researches, and lamenting that so much could not be given to the earth, because it would not be safe as yet to do so. We are permitted to see the progress that had been made in locomotion, and we were amazed at the advance that had been made since the days when we were on the earth plane. But that is as nothing to that which is to come. When man exercises his will in the right direction, there will be no end to the enormous rewards that he will gain in material progress. But material progress must go hand in hand with spiritual progress, and until they do, the earth world will not be permitted to have the many inventions that are ready and waiting to be sent through. The generality of people of the earth world are very stubborn. They resent any encroachment upon their preserves, or upon what they have presumptuously claimed as their preserves. It was never intended that when the results of our scientists' researches are communicated to the earth, they were to be seized upon by the few to the exclusion of all others. Those that have done so find that they have to pay a very heavy price for their brief span of earthly prosperity. Neither was it intended that the two worlds, ours and yours, should be as they are now, so far apart in thought and contact. The day will assuredly come when our two worlds will be closely interrelated, when communication between the two will be a commonplace of life, and then the great wealth of resources of the spirit world will be open to the earth world to draw upon for the benefit of the whole human race. The sight of so much activity on the part of my fellow inhabitants in this realm had set my mind to thinking about my own future work and what form it could take. I had no very definite ideas upon the matter, and so I mentioned my difficulty to Edwin. Ruth, it seems, was troubled similarly, so there were the two of us, having for the first time since our arrival some strange feelings of restlessness. Our old friend was not the least surprised. He would have been more surprised, he said, if we had felt otherwise. It was a sensation common to all, sooner or later, the urge to be doing something useful for the good of others. It was not that we were tired of seeing our own land, but that we had rather a self-conscious feeling. Edwin assured us that we could continue to go upon our explorations indefinitely if we so wished, and that none would criticize or comment upon our actions. It would thus be treated as a matter of our own concern. However, we both felt that we should like to settle the question of our future work, and we appealed accordingly for the guidance of our good friend. Edwin suggested at once that we repair to the borders of the higher realm, where it will be recalled, he said earlier, we should be able to go into this matter. And so we left the Hall of Science, and once more we found ourselves on the outskirts of our realm. We were taken to a very beautiful house, which from its appearance and situation was clearly of a higher degree than those further inland. The atmosphere was more rarefied, and as far as I could observe, we were approximately upon the same spot as on our first visit to the boundary. Edwin led us into the house with all the freedom in the world and bade us welcome. As soon as we entered, I knew instinctively that he was giving us welcome to his own home. Strange to say, we had never inquired about his home or where it was situated. He said he had purposely kept our minds off the subject, but that was only his natural diffidence. Ruth was enchanted with everything she saw, and scolded him for not telling us all about it much sooner. The house was built of stone throughout, and although to the eye it might have appeared somewhat bare, yet friendliness emanated from every corner. The rooms were not large, but of medium size and suitable to all Edwin's purposes. There were plenty of comfortable chairs, many well-lined bookshelves, but it was the general feeling of calm and peace that pervaded the whole dwelling that struck us most forcibly. Edwin bade us to be seated and make ourselves at home. There was no need for us to hurry, and we could discuss our problem in extenso. At the outside, I frankly admitted that I had no particular ideas upon what I could do. While on earth I had been fortunate enough to be able to follow my own inclinations, and I had consequently a busy life. But my work was finished, at least in one respect, when my earthly life ended. Edwin then proposed that perhaps I would like to join him in his work, which principally concerned with taking in hand newly arrived souls whose religious beliefs were the same as we had upon earth, but who, unlike ourselves, were unable as yet to realize the truth of the change they had made and of the unreality of so much of their religion. Much as I liked my friend's proposal, I did not feel competent enough to undertake such work, but Edwin waved aside my objection. I should, he said, work with him, at first at any rate. When I had become used to the task, I could continue independently if I so wished. Speaking from experience, Edwin said that two or more people, and here he glanced at Ruth, could very often give far greater help to an individual soul than could one working entirely alone. The weight of numbers seemed to have a greater power of conviction upon one who was particularly stubborn in holding on to his old earthly religious ideas. Since Edwin felt that I would be of a real service to him, I was very pleased to accept his offer to join forces with him. And here Ruth brought herself forward as another candidate for service under him, subject, of course, to his approval. Not only was the latter instantly forthcoming, but her offer was gratefully accepted. There was much, said he, that a young woman could do, and the three of us, working in such complete harmony and amity, should be able to do some useful work together. I was more than glad that Ruth was to join us, since it meant that our happy party would not be broken up. There was, however, another matter that was in my mind, and it concerned that one particular book that I wished I had not written when I was on earth. I was not rendered unhappy by the thought of this still persisting, but I wanted to be free of it. And although no doubt my new work would eventually bring me that complete peace of mind, I felt that I would like to deal with the matter in a more direct way. Edwin knew what I was hinting at, and he recalled to me that he had already said what he had already said about the difficulties of communication with the earth world. But he had also mentioned that we might seek guidance from higher up. If I still wished to try my hand at communication, then we might appeal for this guidance and advice now, and thus we could settle the whole question of my future work.